Hi, everybody. Thanks for listening. My name is Tom Cottingham, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Flyover Media Group. And today is another one of our conversations with the cohort that won the Vogt Award for 2023. And today we have Eddie and David, both from the Kentucky Hug, and they're here to tell us a little bit about their journey and talk to us about the business and what the next steps are for them. And so thanks, guys, for joining us. And let's just dive right in. How did the two of you come to be startup founders? What was your journey through school and previous jobs that got you to this point? Either one. Eddie, you want to start?
Sure. So if we go all the way back, I have an art degree. I went to school for sculpture and urban planning. And when I was sort of post-college, I was doing city planning for the city of Baltimore. And my mother was running a company called R&R Limousine. Her name's Carrie Fieldhouse. She was running R&R Limousine here in Louisville. And the Kentucky Bourbon Trail in 2013 had really started to grow. And it was not nearly to the extent that happened in 2016, but in 2013, she asked for some help in planning and expanding Kentucky Bourbon Trail experiences. And the Kentucky Distillers Association was a much smaller organization than what they are today. Right. And they also, wanted somebody with my experience and my knowledge and my creativity to come in and help sort of get some synergy started. So I moved back in 2013, and I spent the first couple of years just kind of getting to know this industry. And then in 2016, the Kentucky Distillers Association passed Senate Bill 11, which allowed every distillery in the state to sell alcohol directly to consumers on property. It also allowed distilleries to open bars, restaurants. It allowed them a whole lot more flexibility on the types of offers that were available on property. And then that was really when things took off. In 2016, I'd say about 70% of the industry was doing paper reservations, as in you would call a distillery directly. They'd pick up a landline phone. They'd write your name, number, and the number of people on the day on a piece of paper. And from 2016 to 18, that flipped. So about 70% started utilizing off-the-shelf booking systems. And then the rest of them were still doing paper reservations. In the midst of all of that, I started a company called Coppersville Tours, which was destination management, and it was outside of R&R. And it was a separate company that did just bourbon tour experiences and also help people, figure out when to fly in, when to leave, what hotels to stay at, the whole 9 yards. And another big shift that happened. So I continued to do that until 2019. So as everybody started to get booking systems, that really changed the industry. It allowed it to grow a lot faster. There was a lot more turnover of frontline employees that were at the gift shops and at the visitor centers. So we decided, as my mother, my father, and myself, we rebranded our three companies, Coppersville Tours, R&R Limousine, and Cosmopolitan Coach, into Pegasus to make it easier for people to remember. And we did that was a very successful rebrand. And in 2020, we were still up and running, which is really surprising. But what we saw was that a lot of people across the industry, a lot of distilleries were having challenges with people planning their own trips and not understanding how far apart the distilleries were, as well as sort of some of the expectations when visiting a distillery, like don't smoke near a, giant still that's producing grain alcohol, or, make sure you're wearing closed-toed shoes and not showing up with high heels,
Right.
Yeah, so a lot of that was a challenge. And then there was a lot of inventory challenges across the industry for all the tour plan agencies. And so I knew that we needed to develop at some point a customer-facing automated travel planning experience. And that was kind of really all I knew at the time. We had developed an internal inventory, ticket management system for Pegasus, because when we rebranded, we combined everybody together, the staff.
Right.
And so we wanted to make sure that the tickets weren't getting double used. And the company I worked with said, this really needs to be a public facing product. And I said, I know, I just figure somebody else would have done this. And so they helped get me on that path. I ended up interviewing 17 developers towards the end of 2020. And I met Dan Murphy, who is the executive director for Slingshot Ventures and works in partnership with David. And, he told me about their company, and I said, this is perfect with the way that you all operate, the way that you all go about design and development. It's very research-oriented, data-based. And they were very excited to stick it out with me and really go through this whole process over the next couple of years of development. So we ended up really starting to work very close together in 2021. And then we had signed our operating agreement by August of 2022. But in general, the reason why we had started this endeavor to begin with was because of the difficulty these frontline employees are having across the industry with simple things like refunds and exchanges or answering general questions. And there's just nowhere online to find that. So that's where the Kentucky Hug comes in as being a way that you can plan your trip faster. We can get you to more distilleries in a shorter amount of time in a way that is, not you having 6.5 hours of research to make that happen, and then, that's sort of how we got to today. But it's been a long journey of a lot of planning and a lot of seeing how this industry has grown so quickly since 2016 and trying to make sure that we have a service like this to accommodate a lot of the growing pains that we're having right now.
Well, it is crazy how much it's grown and how Louisville's become now like a bachelor party destination site, and a lot of it is because of the Bourbon Trail, right? And so, David, you got what? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just said for sure. Yes.
Oh, right. Okay. You got looped into this, David. And is there a back end component as well? A data component for the distilleries, or is this primarily front end for the consumer?
Yeah, so it's really two-sided. The front end really eases the pain for the consumer, and then the back end is for the distilleries. One of the biggest problems they have is just access to data. So currently with the booking systems that are out there, they're not built for bourbon tours. They're not built for even spirits, the spirit industry. They're very generic platforms, and the distilleries are only getting, the credit card holder who booked the trip. So if it's a bachelor party and, I'm going to book the trip for all my friends, then they get my data, but they don't get anybody else's data. And it's even worse when you have all these tour operators like Pegasus and Julep who are booking large trips for large parties, and they're just getting Eddie's name because he's the one who booked that on behalf of a tour agency. So these distilleries, these are their customers. These are their supporters that are coming to see them, and they don't even know who they are. So that's a big problem, number one. And then beyond that, they're also getting people who are calling them. They're getting a tour for Maker's Mark, and they're getting questions about Woodford because somebody's booking a bourbon trip, and they just think it's all the same thing. And beyond that, there's also, Eddie, I would say, a lack of visibility to the smaller distilleries. Because people know those big brand names like Makers or Woodford, Jim.
They don't know Rabbit Hole or whatever.
Rabbit Hole, Peerless, Whiskey Thief. Like they don't know these. And there's some really interesting experiences and really kind of craft brands that people should know about. And so those distilleries have their own set of challenges, but there's a lot there for the distilleries as well. Just with us being in Kentucky as well, that's a huge part of this. Just working with Eddie, it's clear that the best way to get a hold of these distilleries is to be present, be in the state, be able to see them in person, call them, be down the street. We love the industry. We're in the industry. We're all here in Kentucky. This is a big thing for Kentucky, and that's personally one of the reasons I love being a part of it, is because I'm a huge bourbon fan. I'm a huge Kentucky fan. I've lived here 25 years. This is where I graduated. This is where I started my business. This is where I got married. This is everything. And so with this, we get to elevate really what for a lot of people is sort of the front door to Kentucky. Is like, we're going to book a bourbon trip.
Yeah, it is the front door. I think that's an interesting way to put it. And it is great to be doing something that, you really love to do. Because otherwise, being an entrepreneur requires way too many hours to just do it for the money. There's got to be some other kind of love there. So do you work with the Bourbon Distillers Association, or are you working with each individual distiller to put this together?
Okay, good question. It's there's a lot of complicated answers with these things because we are working with both and everyone all at the same time. So, which is kind of that's the process that we had to do with Pegasus and Copper Soul Tours before that, and previously R&R. So, in general, over the last year and a half, Slingshot and I interviewed distilleries to develop this booking system and the back end of the website, which rolls out November 1st. And then we also interviewed over 100 consumers in a very formal setting to understand the consumer challenges before we rolled out what we wrote the Kentucky, or the Kentucky Hug website, which was on August 1st. So as far as the development and design goes, we interviewed distillery employees ranging from the person that greets them at the front door all the way up to like ownership and management and everybody in between to figure out what are all the things that they need to really ensure that our first version of this product that rolls out in November fits a lot of the needs for the distillery, as well as, solves problems on the data side for also ownership and the frontline employee that's answering too many questions. So we've kind of, through the interview process, in order to get to design, we went directly to the distilleries. However, we have had tons of conversations with Bardstown Tourism, Lexington Tourism, Louisville Tourism, the Kentucky Distillers Association, and a whole host of other organizations that have a great interest in not just the data that we're capturing, but also alleviating some of the challenges that consumers have. One of the key pieces that we took out of our research is that if somebody is going to book 2 distillery tours, the average amount of time is 6.5 hours in Googling in order to just book 2 distilleries.
Wow.
And that's assuming that they booked those 2 and didn't need to make changes. If they need to make changes to that, then they have to try and get a hold of a distillery. And usually people try to do that on a weekend, which are the busiest days for the distilleries, and then they can't answer the phone. So there's a lot of sort of like chicken and the egg kind of thing with this. But in general, we're working with kind of everybody to get them up to date as to what we're doing and the types of data that we're collecting. But one of my big goals in doing this project is so that we can provide better data to the tourism agencies and to folks like the Kentucky Distillers Association, so that when they go lobby, in Frankfurt or Washington on behalf of our industry, that they can feel really confident in the numbers and the data that they're talking about, that it's not just sort of like a guess, or, these are the numbers that we got from the people that sent it to us. The 73 we're working with, we only got 20, so we just kind of have to guess on the rest of them. Right. So, yes, we're working with kind of everybody at the moment. And we have a handful of formal partnerships with organizations like that. However, we're really in the, very beginning stages of this software and this development. So, we'll start to formalize and solidify more of those partnerships come November, as we can really start to show these folks what that data looks like and what they can do with it.
Right. So are there then 2 different revenue models? Sounds like on the back end, it's a SaaS model. On the front end, it's a percentage of the money they spend. I'm not quite sure what that is. Is that accurate?
So yes, between now and November and forward, is in like between now and November, our revenue model is a 7% booking fee on the combined transactions. So if somebody books, Heaven Hill, Evan Williams, and Lux Row, they are going to pay a 7% fee for the, process of putting together their itinerary and all the services that Kentucky Hug provides. And that fee in comparison, go for it.
Are they paying it, or is that coming out of what the property owners would get?
That would be the consumer is paying that 7% fee.
Okay.
And to put that into context, Any Road is currently 40% of the market here is in like 40% of distilleries are using the booking system Any Road. Any Road charges the consumer a 10% booking fee.
Wow.
And some distilleries have a lower booking fee, but in general, it's a 10 or more percentage fee. And there's a couple of other systems out there. We are very comparable, if not less expensive than if you were going directly to that distillery's website. So in a lot of ways, like if you wanted to book Heaven Hill Lux Row and Limestone Branch, if you went individually to those 3 websites and booked those on their individual branded websites, you'd end up spending about the same cost, if not more, to do it there than it would if you got all the itinerary assistance that we provide through the Kentucky Hugs website. So that 7% fee is a very, very cost-effective fee. And then once we add in sort of higher end experiences that may, be exorbitantly expensive for the average consumer, we will not be charging, an uncapped fee on that. So every other system out there does not have a cap. So if you say had a barrel pick that might be $50,000, those systems currently out there are going to charge just a flat fee on that, a 10% fee or something like that.
Right.
Whereas for us, we have a totally different fee. That's something we're in the process of developing. But then in November, we will be charging a SaaS model where the distilleries will be paying access for their data as well as direct communication channels with the consumers that have created profiles through our site. So there's a couple of other things that will come in November, but in general, it'll be the 7% booking fee to the consumer, and which will be capped as we add in experiences that it does not make sense to just do a flat 7% for. And then we have the SaaS model rolling out in November.
Okay. So it's almost 2 very different businesses in some ways. David, Eddie seemed very confident about November 1st. I just thought I would pass that on.
Oh, yeah.
Software, right? So it sounds like you guys have a really good map for what you're going to be doing with the product. And, you won this $25,000, which is non-dilutive. I assume you're raising money. We're always raising money. What is, beyond November, is it more going to be updating and working and optimizing the platforms, right? Kind of 2 different ones, or are there other plans you guys have? What does the next 12 to 18 months look like after November?
So
Yeah.
I was gonna say I can talk broadly, but I know that Dave probably he's better at answering this without talking in the clouds. So I will
place. But beyond that, the next year we do have some big plans. A mobile app is one big part of that. I think having a mobile app where, if you're visiting, think about it, 3 or 4 distilleries over 2 days with a large party, it makes a lot of sense to have that itinerary on your mobile app. You can look at it. In big part of this initially for Eddie was how can we get the communities, how can we let people know about what's in these communities beyond just these distilleries? So it lends itself really well to a mobile app. Beyond that, just having the mobile app also can serve as a ticket. It can do. There's a lot of third-party age verification we can use to verify that somebody is 21. So that's a big part of it is a mobile app. And then I would say the other thing is, over the long haul, we want this to be something where, when somebody's planning a bourbon, there's all these things around it. There's these restaurants, there's these events, there's transportation, there's unique stays, not just your ordinary hotels, but really interesting stays that kind of fit along that theme. And so long term, we really want to capture that entire experience for the consumer. Maybe you can book some hotels or really cool Airbnb properties. You can see what's going on around town. You can book those on the platform, or at least be aware of those things. We can get you in touch with transportation. So I think that's really the long-term goal, is we want to just enrich the entire experience and let people know all the great things in Kentucky. And then I would say beyond that, Kentucky is just where we're starting because we know it so well and we can prove the model here. But there are 33 whiskey trails outside of Kentucky. There are other industries such as wine and Napa Valley that have similar problems. So the idea is very, very large. The Kentucky part of it is very large in itself, to be honest, and I see us focusing there at least the next couple of years, I would think, Eddie. I mean, but that's there's big things beyond that, and I think that's what's so exciting. A lot of great things we can do.
So when you brought up, other like Airbnbs, or not Airbnbs, but places to stay. And you talked, Eddie, a little bit about kind of the high-end concierge service you were giving in your prior life. Are you anticipating at some point you'll get a percentage of all bookings, hotel? If I want to book another tour, it's not a bourbon tour. If I want to, it seems to me kind of two groups of people, right? You got the urban bourbon people, and then the Lexington bourbon people, right? I want to go see horse country and the distilleries, or I want to see the places in Louisville and stay here and have more of an urban experience. But the real question is, ultimately, will you see you guys taking a piece of kind of all that bookings and other things that might be sold through the platform?
Yes. So to kind of back up what David said is that, yes, we have, when I came to them in 2020, I said, I want a one-stop shop for an entire multi-day trip. And I don't want it to be clouded with advertising like, Expedia and these other places are. A guest really needs to be able to see what's visible in these communities so that they're not just running from one distillery to the next, totally missing out on all the amazing events and services in between, and these small towns that have worked very hard to open up, nice coffee shops and great restaurants and all this other stuff that gets overlooked. So, I was like, how do we get everybody visible, and where do we start? And so in our research, we ended up narrowing down that, one, the largest driver of tourism here in Kentucky is bourbon. So first and foremost, that's where we need to fix the problem. And the problem was they didn't have accurate data, and they don't have a booking system that accommodates their needs, where, it's more than just tours and tastings. Jim Beam has a restaurant, they have a bar, they have cocktail experience, they have events, they have all these things that really need to be accommodated with one system. So that's why we went down that road first. However, that is by no means what the goal is. We absolutely want to solve this problem for the distilleries first and foremost, but that is only so that we can pour the foundation, the necessary foundation we've yet to really pour since 2016, so that we can begin to uplift everyone else involved with this industry and really show the person visiting Kentucky and these small towns that they're not coming here to buy a bottle of bourbon that they can't get in Virginia. They're coming here to engage with people who have, in many cases, been working at these distilleries for multiple generations and have some of the best stories and some of the best cultural heritage that anyone could interact with. And so we really want to bring visibility to that and create a platform that all of that stuff can live on. So yes, we absolutely anticipate, making commissions on hotel bookings, as well as Airbnbs and other sort of stays like VRBOs. But then in addition, helping a consumer book a restaurant experience or, a tasting experience or a bunch of other things. I mean, already, I know we've talked a lot about distilleries, but I'm looking over at my board right now. We are going to be onboarding a bunch of stuff that is not distilleries. Like, great example, the Fraser History Museum. They have a ton of incredible things around spirit experiences, both their Spirit of Kentucky exhibit, as well as what Stephen Yates does there for tastings, customized tours, all kinds of cool stuff. And so that gets completely overlooked by the consumer, because when they Google Kentucky Bourbon Distilleries, that place does not show up. So, those are going to be things that we're also onboarding even before November, that will begin to enrich people's experiences here, so that they're not just coming, drinking something at a bar and peeling out of town, but that they are understanding there's a lot of culture and heritage here, which is why this is the bourbon capital. Why Bardstown's the bourbon capital is because, that dates back into before the 1700s, so, and that's something that a lot of people don't know when they're planning their trips, and we want to make that visible.
Well, and I totally get it. There was a consultant, and I don't know who hired him, Greater Louisville or somebody, but it was one of those few reviews of a consulting report when you were like, oh, these guys earn their money, right? And one of the things he was saying, and it goes to what you're saying, is he was talking about how do you attract people to a city for events, right? Whether it's a convention or bourbon tours or whatever. And he was really focused on millennials and saying they want an authentic story. They want an experience and an authentic
Mhm.
story. And he goes, and from that standpoint, he goes, Louisville's tops, right? I mean, there are other cities that have great stories too, but I mean, you don't get much better than ours. And it was the infrastructure that they were focusing on that we really didn't have. And this is a little piece of that, but it's a real important piece where, right, you're coming here, all you know is the Bourbon Trail, all you know are the big distilleries, and you may not know anything about Lexington and horse country, or maybe that's what you do know. Anyway, it makes huge amounts of sense. And promoting the locally owned businesses and the other kind of artisan places that we have, which are numerous, and again, numerous in lots of other cities, like you said. That's what people really want, right? But it's just easier to default to a chain restaurant or whatever, because you know it. And the other thing about the app is you're going on a tour with other people that are all going to share the app and have the same itinerary, and everybody's going to be more or less knowing what they're doing, right? Well, it sounds like you guys have a plan. I mean,
Yes, we do.
Yeah,
We have a very, I like to say our plan is always constantly informed by the people that we're working with, and that's the main reason why, Slingshot is involved in this, is because they've always allowed development and design to be led by, who their customer is, and not just what my ideas are, which is what I needed, so they've been great at that.
It's interesting because it's a hard thing for founders to do, right? To even structure the questions in an objective way, let alone hear the answers in an objective way. And I've talked to lots and lots of entrepreneurs over the years, and with Flyover in particular. And when I ask them, what's the most important thing an entrepreneur needs to learn to do? Probably the most consistent, I would say the most consistent answer is customer discovery, or a version of that, right? And it's hard for founders to do. Most founders are product people. So the fact that you've done that and you realize that, and Slingshot gets how important that is, gives you a ginormous advantage, because most of us can rationalize, well, they didn't like it because of X. If they only knew how lost, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times you hear a customer, you hear 3 or 4 in a row say, no, I don't really care about that. And it's like the thing you think is coolest. Then you just got to say, okay, man, we won't do it.
Yeah.
Or we won't do it now.
I mean, it's so true though. I mean, you just have to, separate yourself, your identity from the idea. And we, like at Slingshot, I tell my clients this, I say, I don't care about your idea. I care about you and your company or your organization. And that's kind of the theme, is like, look, your idea could be wrong. That's what I'm about. It's like, but your organization, I want it to succeed. I want the hug to succeed. And you have to separate yourself, because you have an idea and you go through this euphoria of, wow, this is awesome. And you think about all these good things, and you go down 5 years in advance in your head and you plan it and you have this big fancy plan. And then, when you hear the customer, you don't want to, it's your baby at that point. You don't want anybody calling your baby ugly,
Right.
but they're going to do it. Or if they do call your baby ugly, you're just going, what are you talking about? It's my baby. So
Right.
you gotta separate yourself from that, and that can be very difficult, but it's hugely important just to hear what the market's telling you, what the customer's telling you. And if you don't lose sight of your end goal, which is the success of the organization, I think, and the big vision can still be there, but you got to be able to pivot and move within that feedback.
Yeah, no, I often say that being an entrepreneur is staying alive long enough to figure it out, right? I mean, right? Because
Yes.
and you talk about the organization, I think about the team, and I feel like that's one of the things that we're not particularly good at in entrepreneurship, is helping people build teams. Because to your point, nothing in your business plan is going to come true, right? It may be better, it may be worse, it may be a total sideways pivot. So the real question is, what does the team do when the plan doesn't work, right? Because it won't. And that's the real answer. That's the real question, right? Is what are you going to do when you find out that one of the things that you really thought was important isn't important, or costs way more than your model will sustain, or whatever, right? That's when the magic really starts to happen. And I think that's when entrepreneurs really shine is, I had this plan, I had this dream, it's not working out the way I thought it was, but the end goal, like you said, can still be achieved.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing that I think really differentiates me as a different type of CEO is my art school experience. I had my entire 4 years of school was about criticism, critique, and feedback. So, which in business school, you don't necessarily experience that in the same way. You don't spend 8 hours a day hearing people say, I don't like it, and this does not work. So I've had a lot of practice and getting that feedback. And then, doing 10 years of tours for thousands and thousands of people, I get a lot of feedback as well. And so, and not only that, but when I came on to R&R back in 2013, I learned more from the employees that had been working there for 20 something years than I could have ever learned from books and, research online and other formats. So I have always been a we person and not an I person. And when I came to Slingshot, I came in the door saying, I have an idea of what the problem is, and I think it might be this, but I really don't know for sure. And I need somebody who's not me to be asking those questions. And, the consumers that we interviewed, they did not come from Pegasus. They came from Reddit and Google and, 100 other ways. We did. And yes, there were a handful of people we interviewed from Pegasus, but that was a teeny tiny little bit of who we got feedback from. So, again, kudos to, our team here. But when things do not go to plan, we're all very comfortable with that. One, Slingshot being product development, like this is not their first rodeo. I mean, David's been doing this for over 20 years. So, he's very used to when things get a little haywire and go 12 other directions that you weren't expecting. And then for me, I am aware of how to communicate those things and also be noticing those things. I'm like, okay, I see that there seems to be a big need for this. How about we research this? Let's do some customer discovery, figure out if we need to learn more about this little bit of the world that we didn't think was that important. We had that same thing happen. The first week we opened, every Airbnb and hotel in the state said, we want to be on there, and we had to kind of go back and say, do we need to reevaluate our rollout plan, or can we actually put this off because we really don't feel, and this was not in our plan to begin with, but we did, all get together and sit down and have a serious discussion about whether or not that made sense or not.
That's revenue, right?
Yeah. So we really, I think we've got an incredible team of people between David's mind and my mind, and then Dan being sort of I don't know how to describe Dan, and Dave, you can probably describe Dan and Sarah better than I can, but everybody calls Sarah the mom of the hug, which I feel like, I don't know if she totally loves that, but she takes all of our, kind of like harebrained ideas and concerns, and she really filters that into sort of useful content. And then, Dan kind of helps us all communicate amongst one another. He's kind of like the glue between us. And so we all really fulfill a great role.
It sounds like you guys have built a great team. And like I said, I think that is so important. I mean, it's really vital. And having your experience, David, is really useful too. Having been through some of this stuff before and understanding the chaos and, double the time, double the cost kind of in your mind, sort of exercises that we all do. Well, it sounds like you guys are really onto something, and you're right. It's much bigger than bourbon, and if you can pull it off in the bourbon trail, then I think the world is your oyster, because there's tons of applications for this kind of stuff. This front end, back end thing is so important, right? Making, having a POS system that really works for the customer, and on the back end, getting enough relevant data that the vendors and the owners can use that to, make themselves smarter and better. It's a great challenge, but there's a huge need for it. That's for sure. And especially in this kind of ticketing thing where there's so many intermediaries in the process. And you're right, the owner of the venue never really knows who their customer is, and can't interact with them, even though they know that 80% of their revenue, if they can identify that 20% that it comes from, that, that's bank. So I wish you great success. It's been really interesting meeting both of you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the accelerator. You got a few more weeks on that. And let's stay in touch. I hope to get everybody together in a Brady Bunch kind of thing when you're done with the accelerator, and just do a podcast with everybody on and talking about what they've learned and the scariest things they learned and all that stuff. But and the other thing is, obviously, if you can make this thing work in this economy, where you got to be lean, your burn rate's got to be low, and you got to have a long view, then you're really well set up for the future when things get a little more robust. Although I think the Bourbon Trail remains fairly robust. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys. And I've enjoyed talking to you and learning about this, and let's definitely stay in touch.
Yeah, I wanted to say
Thank
one
you.
more thing in regards to what you just said about being lean. When 2020 hit, we were one of a handful of companies that survived, as far as tour agencies. And we did not lay anybody off, which was pretty exceptional for our industry. And that was not easy. And that was another big push as to why I decided to do this when I did, which is that destination management companies, tour agencies, travel planners, and all of those people that are keeping our industry going right now have the hardest job in the world. And this service is not just for the consumer that's doing it by themselves, but it's also to help alleviate a lot of the challenges they have. If Mint Julep could book 10 times the amount of tours and have their employees not spend 40 hours a week refreshing web pages to see if that extra ticket's available, that's a win for everyone. That was another thing. And that's why I did this and did not continue to try and do Pegasus at the same time, is because I really wanted to make sure that we had a tool that would help everyone. And that, when the economy gets crazy or hairy, the one thing you can always expect is that people will always want an authentic experience. They will want to communicate with people and commune with in a shared experience. And they're always going to be coming back to this area for some sort of cultural exchange, whether that's to buy a product at a gift shop or to meet somebody in in New Haven, Kentucky. Like, that should be an easy, simple, cost-effective thing that you do not need to go to a travel planner to do if you don't have the money or you don't have the time or the ability to do so. Like, this should be accessible to all, which that's bourbon. Bourbon is America's native spirit. It is like, a national museum in the way that I see it. So everybody should have access to it, regardless of socioeconomic background or income level. And not everybody should need to go through a travel planner in order to just go and visit a distillery.
Well, I think that you summed it up really well. One of the things we know about top performers is the two most important things to them are believing in a vision, which you obviously have, and trusting senior management. And it's very clear that you're very sincere about all this stuff, that both of you are. And that comes through. And that will serve you well. I think it's a cool vision, and it seems like you're going to build a really cool culture. So I salute you. And good luck in the next few weeks. Have fun in the rest of the accelerator, and I hope we circle back soon.
That sounds great.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for having us.
Right on. Thanks a lot, guys.